For over 500 years, the Yangban ruled Korea. Alongside the king and the royal family, they shaped social expectations, economic policy, trends, and would craft the road that the nation of Joseon would travel on, all the way down till its eventual collapse. The role they played was an undisputed reason that the centuries-old country would fall. But who were they? What did they do? Through revolution and struggle, where are they now? Today, let's answer the question, what happened to Korea's elite Yangban class? The Joseon society was split into 4 different classes, with the king ruling above them all. The Yangban were the elites who ruled below the king and above everyone else. This structure draws heavily from Confucian ideology and proved to give some semblance of structure to society. It was a class consisting of the elites, split between high-ranking civil officials and military officers. Throughout history, Yangban families aimed to secure one of these government positions through the civil exam known as the Kwago. It tested people on classical Confucian texts, ideology, and various aspects of history and literature. While in theory open to anyone aside from the lowest class of society, it required much time and resources to effectively study for the Kwago, essentially limiting it to already established families in the Yangban class. Both the civil and military exams were taken in 3 stages, with the first being done regionally, the second done in the capital, and the third done in the presence of the king. Only then was a person assigned an official position in the government or military. The Yangban did not do manual labor and lived off the backs of the lower classes and the land that they would accrue. They were not just rich, but were essentially the aristocratic bureaucrats that shaped Korean policy. While corruption was always present among the Yangban, it became widespread during the 18th and 19th centuries. Powerful families began to monopolize and influence the civil exams and ensured their own family members passed the exams through bribery or coercion, taking the spots of legitimate test takers, thus weakening both the status and the effectiveness of administrative positions. The members of the Yangban were also not required to pay taxes nor serve in the military, to which the burden fell onto the lower classes, causing intense dissatisfaction among the greater population. The Confucian ideals of morality and self-discipline slowly fell apart as the Yangban only worked for their own families and not for the state or the people, as they sold or fabricated the Yangban title and their numbers grew even greater. The lower classes were severely exploited as the Yangban lived in luxury all around the peninsula. They unfairly taxed the peasant population, exploited their labor, and flaunted their wealth, built off the backs of the overwhelming majority. This exploded in 1894 during the Dongak Peasant Rebellion, where peasants hit their breaking point and rebelled against the magistrate Joseon in the Jeolla province. This was the catalyst that sparked mass revolts against the Yangban class and the widespread corruption that had destroyed the very fabric of Joseon society. The situation spiraled out of control, and even the king could not quell the widespread revolts, and his government could not stop the rebellion nor protect its own citizens. He turned to Qing China for help, and Qing responded by sending troops to help quell the fighting. Years before, however, Korea had signed the Treaty of Ganghwa with Japan, essentially denouncing the Qing as its protector, so when China sent troops, Japan sent its own troops to secure the situation and challenge Chinese influence in the region. The whole rebellion was one of the triggers of the First Sino-Japanese War. Japan went on to win the war, and it was very clear that reform was needed if Joseon were to survive. Japan had won, and they asserted their influence onto Joseon as the king lost more and more power. A pro-Japanese government was installed, and in an effort to modernize, the government formed a plan to significantly change the way Joseon operated. This became what is now known as the Kabul Reforms, which the king had officially sanctioned. Within its plan, the class structure that had dominated society for 500 years was to be officially abolished. Under the new structure, the Yangban lost all the privileges that they had enjoyed, such as no tax and no military service. the gwagol was officially retired and all citizens of Joseon were granted equal status as bureaucratic function became more important than family ties. While some Yangban openly opposed their loss of status and framed their opposition as fighting foreign influence, their influence gradually faded into history as Japan exerted more power until it was finally annexed in 1910. After the annexation of Korea to Japan, the former Yangban class became extremely fractured. Despite the abolition of the class system, many Yangban possessed education, land, local influence, and social networks. The Japanese had viewed this as useful, and some Yangban and educated Koreans ended up siding with the Japanese while receiving significant benefits. Some of these Yangban collaborated with the Japanese to suppress the efforts of anti-Japanese Koreans in the fight for sovereignty while promoting Japanese rule, and would later be labeled as 친일파, or pro-Japanese collaborators. Some of the Yangban and educated people leveraged their education and former status into becoming educators, scholars, lawyers, and journalists as they etched a living in a newly formed world, while others joined the independence movement against the Japanese through intellectual resistance and independence activism. The Yangban at this point were not destroyed, but abolished into several different roles whose influence can still be felt in the modern day. The Japanese colonization lasted until 1945, when Japan was defeated by Allied forces. Following this, Korea underwent a dramatic social transformation as it was split into two halves, what we now know today as South Korea and North Korea. Starting from nothing, the former Yangban and their families played a unique role. Being educated, cultured, and having extensive social networks, some went on to form the heads of the industry sector, as well as take on public office. This gave many with an education a huge advantage, and the Koreas had a literacy rate of 70 to 80%, and there was a need for structure and leadership. The same cannot be said about the pro-Japanese collaborator Yangban families, as efforts were made to uncover and punish those who were guilty. Early efforts were made a priority, but the Korean War and, by extension, the Cold War, took precedence, and many ended up slipping through the cracks. Many were viewed as useful tools against communism and were given public offices on all levels of government as experienced administrators. In the North, extensive efforts were made to find and persecute those who were Yangban and/or Japanese collaborators. North Korea viewed them as one of the reasons so many suffered through systematic oppression and exploitation of the lower castes of society during the Joseon Dynasty. Kim Il-sung made a concentrated effort to identify the former Yangban, landlords, collaborators, and the general elite, strip them of their land and influence, and in many cases, imprison or execute them. He then created a new class system known as the Songbun, where people were categorized by their lineage and loyalty to the new regime. In this system, former Yangban and collaborators were officially labeled as hostile and to be eliminated. In the modern day, the Yangban class is remembered in a variety of ways. When used in everyday speech, it can be used with both positive and negative connotations. It can refer to someone who is refined, educated, and well-mannered, or as someone who is out of touch, entitled, or lazy, both of which are accurate historical descriptions. While avoiding the term Yangban, many of the largest South Korean corporations have roots in land ownership, education, or social capital. Many of these companies, whether directly Yangban or not, built themselves on the long-standing traditions of education and social hierarchy created by the Yangban elites during the Joseon Dynasty. The concentration on academic excellence in South Korea is a remnant of the Yangban class, and one of the reasons every year millions of students compete to get into the best universities in the country. Despite being abolished over 100 years ago, the influence and culture of the elite Yangban class still echoes through Korean society today, as both one of the reasons why Korea has become so successful, but also a reason so many Koreans suffered throughout history. If you like this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more videos just like this.